This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, Chairman Deere.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's 11:30 in the morning, isn't it?
That's true. It seems like so much later.
Okay. Well, it's time for the meeting to start. So I'll declare the meeting open. Call to order. We have a quorum. We have Director Williams and myself both here, committee members. Director Gray seems to be on the phone. So we're in full force here. I see Director Houston is here, and I believe Director Alvarez was connected.
That is
correct. All right. Is there any public comment?
Chairman Deere, at this time, we do not have any public comment. We do have several people here attending virtually, so if anybody would like to speak during public comment, please let us know now. Seeing
okay. There's no one. Can you hear me, by the way? Am I clear?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Then we'll go to other presentations.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman Deere. Under item 4A, we do have a presentation related to our investment portfolio by Chandler Asset Management. And I believe that our Executive Manager of Finance, Margaret Moja, is here, and she will make the introduction.
Yes, I was about to say good morning as well. So thank you, Chairman Deere and members of the board and committee. I'm here to welcome Chandler Asset Management to make a presentation to us on our investment performance as well as the market information as well. We are able to, through a competitive process, select Chandler Asset Management earlier part of this calendar year, and they began working with us in April of 2021. And so they're here to provide you some market information and some work that they have done with us over the last quarter, and this is the quarter ending June 30th, 2021. With us today, we do have three speakers. One of them is Jason Schmidt, followed by Christopher McCary and also Mia Corral-Brown. And with that, I believe Mia is going to start off with some introductions and then turn it over to her two colleagues to share out the presentation. That presentation is included in your packet, starting on page 5 of your packet. Sorry, page 4 of the packet. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mia to make introductions.
Hi, good morning, Chairman, members of the committee, Board of Directors, and staff. I'm Mia Corral-Brown, a Relationship Manager at Chandler, and I'm going to begin our presentation this morning for West Basin Municipal Water District. If we could advance 2 slides, please. One more, please. So as Margaret mentioned, Chandler Asset Management was selected via a competitive process in early January, and we began working with the district effectively March 31st, 2021. At Chandler, we have an assigned engagement team that works very closely with Margaret, Marianne, and Sylvia. I'll start by introducing myself, as I am a new face to each of you at West Basin Water District. I'm Mia Corral-Brown. I'm a Senior Relationship Manager at Chandler Asset Management. I've been with the firm for over 17 years and have 24 years of investment industry experience. As a relationship manager, I serve as a key point of contact to ensure that we are providing all of the deliverables that really support and roll up the investment management process. I also have Christopher McCary with me today. Christopher is a senior portfolio strategist who communicates trade ideas on a non-discretionary manner with Margaret, Marianne, and Sandra. Chris, if you can go ahead and just wave hello, and we'll have you say a few words when we get to your section. That would be fantastic. We also have Jason Schmidt present with us. I don't see his face on the screen, but I do know he's with us. And Jason leads the implementation of the investment strategy on behalf of the district. Also pictured here is Kara Rayner Sanchez. Kara is a very integral part of our team. She's the Director of Client Service and creates specialized reports. our goal as an investment firm and an engagement team assigned to us based on Water District is to really save your staff time and to proactively communicate with you on behalf of all of your information for investments. Next slide, please. Just a bit about our firm, since we are relatively new to the district. Chandler Asset Management was founded in 1988 by our president and chairwoman, Kay Chandler. We are an independent investment advisory firm registered with the SEC. Important to note, we sit on the same side of the desk as you, sharing your fiduciary duty and act in that capacity at all times. We are headquartered locally in San Diego and founded right in San Diego, one of the only investment managers domiciled in the state of California. As of this morning's reading, Chandler manages almost eclipsing $25 billion in assets for clients who share very similar objectives to yours for safety, liquidity, and return. And we offer our clients very customized investment solutions. And both Chris and Jason will talk to you about the investment strategy that we are implementing on behalf of the district. I think it's critically important to note that we are independent. We do not have any ties to brokerage, banking, or financial advisory services. Next slide, please. Last but not least, we work with over 125 California public agencies and manage over $15 billion in our home state alone. We also have very significant experience managing water district and wastewater solutions across the United States. But you can see that specifically in Southern California alone, we work with many of your neighbors and peers. Their programs have benefited from utilizing Chandler's services, but it also is significant to note that we have the ability to very effectively carry out the district's scope of services. Next slide, please. We also work with you on all aspects of your investment program. We don't necessarily look at this as purchasing or selling one security that might be additive, but really working with staff to create an optimal investment program for the district. So we work very closely with Margaret and her team in a non-discretionary manner. We have provided very initial reviews of the investment policy and have shared our feedback with staff. We analyze all of the underlying credits daily, and we have worked with staff on cash flow analysis. We monitor those market conditions, again, very frequently. And as market conditions change, we report changes to staff both on a weekly basis via our weekly economic update and monthly as well, formally through our reporting package, and as well as the bond market review. We provide assurance and compliance with your portfolio, both on a monthly basis as well as quarterly basis, and compliance is monitored against your investment policy as well as California Government State Code daily. Jason and Chris will talk to you a little bit about performance, and we are always available to report to the board, finance committee, and staff on a regular basis. We provide the monthly, quarterly, and annual reports that all meet GASB standards effectively and in a timely manner. All of those reports are furnished to staff on the 3rd business day following month end, and then at the appropriate timeline, quarterly and annually. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Chris, and Chris is going to talk to you a little bit about the economic cycle that we're currently investing assets in on your behalf.
Thank you, Mia. And as Mia had mentioned before, we passed it on to Jason to review the district's portfolio. Staff asked me just to make a couple comments on the economy. So if we move to the next page, generally the overall economic theme as we continue to move through the economic recovery from the pandemic is that generally the path of the economy is contingent on the path of the virus. Now, with the resurgence of the virus over the summer, what we saw was a moderate disruption in economic activity, but combined with the accommodative monetary policy from the Fed, the immense vaccine adoption rate, and as well as the fiscal support, what we've been able to see, it's weathering some of the challenges, again, from the infection rates. But as we're moving into the fall, what we're continuing to see is possibly to some disruptions relative to supply chains and labor costs. And one of the big things, one of the 2 mandates from the Fed specifically are stable prices and full employment. And as you can see here, what we have is the non-farm payroll numbers came in for August. A little bit underwhelming. What we're looking at right now is an unemployment rate of 5.2%, but the non-farm payrolls for August were expected to be around 735,000. They came in at 235,000. So a little bit disappointing, but representative of the disruption that we saw towards the end of the summer from the increase with the Delta variant of the virus. But what we look at is the ongoing trends that we've seen relative to employment. The 6-month moving average for non-farm payrolls is over 653,000, which is generally strong and moving in that positive direction as continuing unemployment claims continue to decline from where we were, and as we move back to that level of where we were for pre-pandemic levels for unemployment. However, there still seems to be a little bit of a disconnect that exists between the labor market, between jobs and those available in the market looking for talent. Now, with the expiration of the added unemployment benefits from the American Rescue Plan occurring earlier September, there's an expectation that we're going to see some positive numbers with overall labor and labor force with non-farm payrolls moving into September and as we move into the fall and winter months. One of the challenges, though, that we could see a little bit from the wage and employment report is the potential increase of wage inflation. If we continue to see these challenges relative to labor, we could start seeing that impact from wage increases, and then that falls into some challenges with relative to wage inflation. And if we move to the next page, that again specifies one of the other areas that have been concerned and hot topics over the summer, which has been inflation. Now, as of the production of this report, this is actually showing the CPI came in for July at 5.4%. For August, it actually came down at 5.3%. So representative of the fact that we might see a little bit of suggesting that pricing pressures could be easing a bit, but the conversation around inflation is specifically whether it's transitory or persistent. We've seen these high numbers over the summer of inflation numbers due to the fact that we're coming off of the base effects comparing to where pricing pressures were, or pricing activity was in 2020. So as we're coming out of the summer months, moving into the fall, expectations that we're going to see a little bit of easing from that. But again, there is possibly some concerns, especially with wage inflation impacting that. The Fed actually just came out 30 minutes ago with adjusting their expectations for core PCE for 2021. The Fed looks at core PCE as their target for inflation, with having a cycle, an average cycle, a little bit over 2%, or an economic cycle. They just adjusted their projections for core PCE for 2021 from 3% to 3.7%. So again, we're seeing a little bit some of the impacts of that Delta variant extending that recovery from the going back to pre-pandemic levels. But it again is something that we're continually looking at and impacting. But the Fed has indicated if inflation is a little bit more persistent than they're expecting, and they're expecting to be transitory, they do have the ability to address that from policy itself. Now, moving into the Fed as we move to the next page, what we've seen from the Fed in response to the coronavirus pandemic, as you'll notice in that chart in the upper right-hand corner, the Fed dropped the federal funds rate to that zero-bound range in March of 2020. And we have been given the expectation that they're planning to not increase the federal funds rate until 2023. So one area that we've been looking at to see if there's any adjustment in their policy has been their asset purchases. So you'll notice the Fed's balance sheet has increased to over $8.5 trillion due to the fact that they purchase $120 billion a month of treasuries and agency-backed securities. What we are looking for the Fed is some guidance as to possibly when they're going to start lowering or quote unquote tapering their asset purchases. And the verbiage we actually just got from the Fed 30 minutes ago indicating that it's coming soon for that conversation around tapering. So we're expecting the asset purchase tapering is definitely going to be warranted in the near term. And Chandler, we believe that the Fed will initiate their tapering, or in a sense, lowering their asset purchases in the first part of 2022, with an expectation of an official announcement from the Fed possibly at their November meeting. So that's one of the areas we continue to monitor. And with that, monitoring also the yield curve. So if we move to the next page, what we saw, again, in response to that coronavirus pandemic, a precipitous drop in interest rates in the spring of 2020. And then this spring, what we saw is actually an increase in interest rates from inflation expectations and growth expectations as we reopened and with the immense vaccine distributions. You'll notice that in the chart in the upper left-hand corner. You'll see what we saw as interest rates increased significantly earlier this year and then flattened off throughout the summer, especially related to some concerns with the Delta variant. But what we have seen is that steepening of the yield curve. So if you look in the chart in the upper right-hand corner, the yield curve steepened significantly from where it was a year ago. We look at that solid green line as August of 21 compared to that dotted magenta line of August 20. However, it has flattened from where we saw yields at the beginning of the summer back in May of 21. We do expect, though, as we continue with the vaccine distributions and with the reopening, there's an opportunity for yields to increase as we move into the end of 2021, especially given the opportunity for it to continue to steepen. So as we move into the second half, into the end of 2021, we're looking at a little bit more clarity on the data, specifically with the labor report, as well as getting some more clarity on inflation expectations. And again, with the expectations for the Fed to continue moving in that direction of officially tapering their asset purchases in the beginning of 2022. So with that, I'd like to pass it on to Jason Schmidt to review the district's portfolio.
Great, thank you, Chris. And so if we can move forward, going on to page 12, please. And so looking at the objectives of the district. So first, it's safety of the assets, liquidity, being able to provide any funds that are needed for the operations of the district, and then finally yield after those first two are met. We look at a performance objective really to enhance the portfolio returns at least equal to, if not above, the benchmark over a market cycle. And then we're purchasing high quality investments that comply with the district's investment policy and also California government code. Moving on to the next page. This is really looking at the compliance of the portfolio. And so you can see that your portfolio fully complies with your investment policy and California government code. If we move on to the next page, it shows a little bit more of that compliance. And then I'm going to move on to page 15, looking at the portfolio characteristics. So looking at the district's characteristics versus that of its benchmark, looking at the table, moving left to right, I'm going to look at the center column there, which is your district's portfolio. And so the average maturity of the portfolio is 1.72. The average duration of the portfolio, remember that duration is your portfolio sensitivity to the interest rate. The higher that number, the more sensitive. The lesser that number, the less sensitive. That's 1.63. The average purchase yield on the portfolio is 0.86. Here's one thing to think about. If you had 100% of your portfolio in LAIF today, that would earn around 20 basis points. So by buying securities and purchasing securities further out the yield curve, you're definitely enhancing the earnings, and that is going back to the district. You can see the average market yield right below that at 0.27. It's a AA+ rated portfolio, so a very high quality portfolio, and the portfolio's market value today is $40.7 million. Moving on to the next page. Looking at the sector distribution. So this is looking at the different sectors or different security types that are in the district's portfolio. And I'm really going to focus on the pie graph on your left-hand side. And so this is as of June 30, 2021. And so you can see that we hold a variety of different types of securities. I like to say that we're using all the tools in our toolbox in order to manage the district's portfolio. And with that, supranational securities represent 1% of the portfolio. Negotiable CDs are about 5.4%. We have a small percent in municipal securities, less than 1% at 0.8% of the portfolio. There is some in the money market fund today, that's 7.1%. You also can see corporate notes are 13.7%. Agencies are 17.1%. ABS stands for asset-backed securities. That's 1.2%. And then we have a lot of treasury securities in the portfolio, which of course has the ultimate safety and liquidity in the portfolio, which is approximately 53.7% of the portfolio. As we move on, looking at the different issuers that are represented in the portfolio. So on to the next page, on page 17, you can see that the majority of securities are towards the top of that. And so that includes US Treasuries and its agencies. So you can think of these as government securities. And then as you move further down there into the corporate securities and the negotiable CDs, notice those that are less than 1 or 2% of the portfolio. And so we really hold a very well diversified portfolio. One of the things about diversification, it really allows for the portfolio, it's a risk mitigation tool. And so have a very diversified portfolio, basically not having all of our eggs in one basket. As we move forward, moving on to page 18, you can see also the different issuers there. And then we're going to move forward again onto page 19. This is looking at the average credit quality of the portfolio, the graph above. Your portfolio as of June 30 is in the dark green. The gray is as of May 31st. And you can see that the securities, this is rated on an S&P scale. You can see that the majority of the securities are rated A or better. Those securities that are not rated by S&P or are rated below that are rated by either Moody's and or Fitch rating services, which qualifies them as a permitted investment in your investment policy. As we move forward, looking at page 20, you can see the duration distribution, and think of this as the maturity distribution of the portfolio. Your portfolio as of June is the dark green, as of March 31st is the gray line. You can see that the majority of the securities are held between 1 and 3 years, but we do have some securities that mature off in less than 1 year that would allow for liquidity if the district would need that liquidity in order to conduct its operations. As we move forward, looking at page 21, this is looking at investment performance. And so this is total return. So it's not just yield, but what total return includes is the earnings of the portfolio along with any changes in market value of those securities over that period of time. And what you can see in the graph above, and our since inception date is relatively new. It's March 31st, 2021. But in the graph above, you can see that your portfolio is in the green. The benchmark is that of the gray. I'm going to move right below that to the table below there and look at your portfolio. So over the last 3 months, your portfolio has earned 8 basis points versus the benchmark, which is actually down approximately 3 basis points. And then also that's the same as the since inception return, since we've only had 3 months of management of the portfolio at this point. So doing better than the benchmark by approximately 11 basis points to date. And then moving forward, we're just going to start on page 23, actually, which is the next page. These are looking at the different holdings. I'll let you look at these on your own, but it shows the different categories of securities and the actual securities that are in there. So you can see the asset-backed securities. You can also see the agency securities. As we move on to page 24, you can see the corporate securities. And then as we move on to the next page, on page 25, we continue with those corporate securities. And then on to page 26. And then as we move on to page 27, you will see the money market fund, the municipal securities, and also the negotiable CDs. Moving on to page 28, we complete a negotiable CDs. You can see the supranationals. There's 2 notes there. And then you can see the treasury securities. And that continues on to page 29. And then as we move forward here, from here, you can see on page 31, moving on to page 31, what you can see here is the different transactions. So you can see the different purchases that are happening within the portfolio. Notice that's a wide variety of securities that are being purchased. Again, we spoke about that diversification, basically looking to not have all of our eggs in one basket there. And with that, that concludes our presentation, and we can answer any questions that you may have.
And if I could just add in, this is Margaret. I just wanted to share the information that's shared here. First of all, 2 points is that it is as of June 30th. You'll hear Marianne when she updates on the monthly reporting that she is going to be sharing similar numbers, but it will be through August 31st. So just wanted to make sure that you understand that there are 2 points in times on these investment reports. Also, too, when we discussed the presentation, we wanted just to share with you what it is that Chandler is investing on our behalf. The district does have additional cash and investments from our small and community bank program, as well as our own investment in LAIF, as well as our checking account. And so the totality of that, again, is within our monthly report. And we will work with Chandler to incorporate maybe some of that overall picture there, because when they do look at the investment, not only are they looking at what specifically is sort of given to them to invest on our behalf and to ensure that we are taking full advantage of the market and understanding the market conditions as shared by Chris, but also to make sure that they understand sort of what is our cash flow needs, and that is something that we work with them on a periodic basis to make sure they understand sort of, you know, if there are funds that are needed to be able to pay for projects or for any other needs, that they are aware of that and can make adjustments in this portfolio management. And again, we do meet with them on a regular basis to ensure that we are managing the portfolio to ensure that we are maintaining a high quality portfolio. So I just wanted to provide that additional comments there for you.
Any other additional questions or comments that we might be able to address? Okay, seeing none, that concludes our presentation for today with West Basin Water District. Should there ever be follow-up questions or a need to reach out to us, please let Margaret know, and we'd welcome any questions or comments, and really look forward to working with the district and getting to know the Board of Directors, Finance Committee members, and staff better. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Very good.
Director Deere,
Yes.
next.
We're ready.
We're on 5A, approval of minutes.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman Deere. The item before us is item 5A. It begins on packet page 39, and this is related to the approval of our minutes from, we do have 4 meetings here identified. August 2nd, special board meeting minutes. It's important to note that that meeting does include Spanish translations of the public comments that we received at that meeting. August 5th, special board meeting minutes. Worth noting, packet page 49 through 53 includes the emails that we receive from members of the public that would like to comment on specific items. August 10th, 2021, special board meeting minutes. Again, packet page 57 through 58 also include public comments that we received via email. And then August 23rd, 2021, our regular board meeting minutes. And staff's recommendation is approval of the minutes.
All right. Any questions from directors? Director Williams? Go ahead.
Dear, this is Desi. I'll move approval.
And I apologize, Chairman Deere. Director Alvarez is not actually a member of the committee.
Director Alvarez should be apologizing. Director Williams, do you agree that this should be done on?
Move on.
Yes, I concur with you, Director Deere, that the
All right,
minutes
so-
should move on to the board. Thank you.
Item 5A, the minutes will be sent on. Thank you. Now we're on item 5B.
Thank you very much, Chairman Deere. The next item 5B is related to a fiscal year 2021-2022 community outreach event. And this item was requested by Director Scott Houston for consideration of the West Basin Board of Directors. It is requesting a sponsorship of the Culver City Fiesta La Bayona event to be held Friday, October 29th, 2021 through Sunday, October 31st, 2021. This item would provide a booth or table to disperse West Basin Municipal Water District collateral, as well as an advertisement promoting West Basin Municipal Water District awareness. The request is for a $2,500 sponsorship, and I believe that the recommendation is that the board approve the sponsorship requested by Director Houston. The Culver City's Fiesta La Bayona event to be held Friday, October 29th, 2021 through Sunday, October 31st, 2021 in the amount of $2,500.
Director Williams?
Yes, I would approve this to move on to the board.
I agree, so we'll do that. We'll move it on. Thank you. So that's approved. We'll go to item 5C.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman Deere. The next item is an agreement for bond counsel services. This begins on packet page 85, and I believe Marianne Rexroad, our manager of finance, is here for this presentation.
Yes, thank you, EJ. Good morning. Yes, it's good afternoon, Chairman Deere and members of the committee and board. I'll be presenting on action item 5C, agreement for bond services, which begins, as EJ said, on page 84 of your packet. West Basin requires specialized legal counsel with public finance experience to provide legal review and issuance on the issuance and refunding of bond transactions, and for legal and tax guidance to ensure that West Basin maintains its tax-exempt status. The current contract for bond counsel services is expected to be depleted before the end of this calendar year. Following best practices, staff solicited proposals for bond counsel services and recommends that the board authorizes the interim general manager to enter into a 5-year agreement with Stradling, Yucca, Carlson, and Roth to serve as bond counsel for the period from October 1st, 2021 to September 30th, 2026, and to set the agreement amount for non-transactional work in the amount of $150,000. So bond counsel services fall into 2 major categories: transactional and non-transactional work. For transactional work, that occurs at the time when West Basin enters into a financing transaction, either for new bond issuance or possibly for a refunding of existing debt. The fees associated with this type of a transaction is part of the cost of issuance and will be brought to the board prior to the financing of the transaction. The second category is the non-transactional work. Examples of these tasks are answering legal and tax questions regarding West Basin's projects, filing tax forms for the financing corp, review and submittal of the annual continuing disclosure reports, the annual review of West Basin's financial policy, such as its debt management policy, the disclosure policy, and the swap policy. In other words, non-transactional work performed by bond counsel provides input and guidance over our critical tasks to ensure that West Basin maintains its tax-exempt status. And the fees associated with this type of work is billed on a time and material basis and will be charged against the contract. West Basin's procurement policy, in particular section 5-1.103, exempts the competitive solicitation requirement for legal services. However, following best practices, staff did issue a request for proposal through its e-procurement system in August. We did receive 4 proposals, and 2 proposals were deemed non-responsive. The remaining 2 proposals were reviewed and evaluated by both West Basin staff, and we had 1 external panelist also on the panel. We looked at the proposals for the quality and completeness. We looked at the firm qualifications, capabilities, and experience, as well as the key personnel qualifications, capabilities, and experience, the technical approach and methodology, and last, the price. Both firms were interviewed virtually on September 7th. The interview allowed each firm to present their key personnel that would work on West Basin work and to share in more detail their firm's capabilities and experience. You'll see on a detailed score sheet that we showed on page 87 of your packet, and the summary of those combined scores of the proposal and interview is shown on page 85, along with the fees and the rate schedule for both firms. The transactional fees I mentioned earlier are shown in the top portion of the box, and the non-transactional hourly rates are shown in the bottom of the box. Based on the review of the proposals and the interviews, Stradling, Yucca, Carlson, and Roth received the highest score and selected as the firm who provides the best overall value to West Basin. Stradling, Yucca, Carlson, and Roth has an experienced and capable team who has full understanding of the tax issues facing West Basin, the disclosure requirements, and can meet West Basin's needs in financing transactions at a very competitive cost. I'll read the recommendation, then I'll open it up for any questions. So the recommendation today is that the board authorizes the interim general manager to enter into an agreement with Stradling, Yucca, Carlson, and Roth to represent West Basin as bond counsel for the 5-year period from October 1st, 2021 to September 30th, 2026, and to set the agreement amount of $150,000 for non-transactional work. And that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is this all concur with the budget?
Yes, it does. Funds for the current year for bond counsel services is included in the fiscal year 2021-22 budget, and for future years will definitely be included within those budgets as well to match our revenues and our fees.
Very good, thank you. Other questions? If there are no other questions, then we will, Dr. Williams, should we pass this on for approval?
I concur.
Okay, so it's so done. We'll pass it on to the full board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we'll go to item 5D, commercial paper program renewal.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman Deere. Item 5D begins on packet page 88. It's related to our commercial paper program renewal, and we have our Executive Manager of Finance, Margaret Moshe, here to present this item.
Yes, good afternoon again, directors. Glad to be presenting to you today on this item. This item does begin on page 88 of your committee packet. This board item seeks the board's approval to renew the commercial paper program with the extension of the reimbursement agreement with Bank of the West. This action is to be completed through the approval of resolution 09-21-1139 and an amendment of the reimbursement agreement. As this is a transaction that is required to also be done through the Financing Corp, there will be a special board meeting for the Financing Corp on September 27th to do a similar action for with its own resolution number. The commercial paper program does provide market access to West Basin for low interest debt should the need arise. The commercial paper is a tool available to West Basin along with PAYGO, long-term debt, and if available, external funding. The value of the commercial paper program is that West Basin can draw upon the line when there is a need at the time of the need. To determine the continued need of the program, staff evaluated the district's current 5-year capital program to evaluate the funding source for the new infrastructure and rehabilitation and replacement projects. The 5-year budget estimates that the capital projects to be about approximately $200 million as shown on page 89. Based on the timing and nature of the project, staff assessed how to ensure that these projects are completed with using PAYGO, receiving anticipated external funding, and then looked to commercial paper to provide the necessary funding to complete these important projects to maintain the district's infrastructure to meet contractual requirements with the customers to meet the quality, quantity, and reliability of that recycled water. The district has a few new infrastructure projects that are well supported by external funding and a low interest loan. And it is anticipated at this time that the balance of the PV lateral project will require additional funding to complete the project. A significant portion of the district's CIP program is for R&R projects, which is about $140 million. Now this $140 million is over the 5-year period of time, and it does represent about 50 R&R type projects. The district intends to use PAYGO for a significant number of these projects, as these projects tend to be smaller in estimated cost, but they also have a shorter useful life. There are about 9 projects that have been that are system-wide facility improvements, which have a longer useful life and are good candidates for using the commercial paper if other funds are not available to fund these critical R&R projects. So based off of the review of the 5-year capital program, staff noted that a 3-year renewal period similar to the one that we currently have seems appropriate. As shared at the August F&A committee quarterly debt report, staff was able to share that we would be requesting proposals for qualified banks to ensure that the district is receiving the lowest cost for the commercial paper. The district solicited fee proposals from 21 qualified banks. The district did receive 5 proposals and recommends that Bank of the West for continuation. On page 90 of the board package or the committee package, you will see the results. While there were several banks that had similar pricing, the upfront costs with Bank of the West council to renew or extend the commercial paper was $10,000 compared to the $45,000 to start a new bank relationship. I would also note that the 30 basis points that is reflected in this proposal is also the current rate that we are paying today. So with the lowering of the anticipated authorization amount from 50 million, which is our current authorization amount, down to $30 million, the cost to ensure the district has easy access to the market is approximately $90,000 compared to the over $150,000 the district currently pays. These funds are budgeted as part of debt service. For the reasons stated above, staff does recommend moving forward with the extension of the commercial paper, as this is a prudent decision to have access to the market in the near term. In other words, the line is available to us as we need it. This action does not authorize new debt, but rather provides us market access to the district. To effect this extension, the district is required to approve a resolution and the amendment to the reimbursement agreement with Bank of the West. Starting on page 93 is the resolution, and on page 96 is the amendment. I do have District Bond Counsel here, Doug Brown with Stradling, to provide us a little bit more detail about those two documents. And if I could have Doug on screen or on phone with me to share out on those two particular documents, and then I can read the recommended motion.
Okay.
Thank you, Margaret. Directors, what you have before you is a single action to recommend that the board approve the resolution. The resolution really does two things. It authorizes the amendment, and then it also authorizes your board president and your district staff to sign various documents. Just like when you buy a house, at the closing of this renewal, there'll be a variety of certificates and notices and instructions that need to be given. So this resolution authorizes your staff and your board president to undertake those activities. The amendment itself is very simple. It's just extending the term. There's really been no substantive changes. That's one of the advantages of renewing with the existing bank as opposed to starting over with a new bank. As Margaret pointed out, the legal fees for bank counsel, if you'd gone with another bank, were significantly higher, and that was because they would have wanted to potentially, renegotiate various financial covenants and other provisions. So as I said, the amendment is quite simple and really just extends the term of the existing agreement. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions? Well, it's all been very clearly explained. Is there a question?
Chairman Deere, I have a question if Director Williams does not.
Director Alvarez, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Do we have any need to borrow money this year?
We have identified certain projects that are in the 5-year capital plan that would be good, as I said, good candidates for it. One of them is the cathodic protection program. Another one that is being contemplated by the board at this time is the solids handling program. Again, we do have some external funding coming in from our customers through our refinery agreements, but there are additional funds that are necessary to be able to pay those costs up front, since and those refinery agreements are going to be received over either a couple years or several years in order to do so. So at this time, we do anticipate that we have needs, because we are also identifying, like I said, a number of projects that would be using our PAYGO funding rather than, again, utilizing debt for that.
Okay, just for clarification, I know you said that we have contemplated a few projects, but if I heard you correctly, I may have missed one. So please, I want to know specifically what projects we would need to borrow money for. The one you mentioned is the solids handling project. What other projects specifically do we need to borrow money for?
Sure. The ones that I can view from the 5-year capital plan is one of them is one that we're currently doing right now, which is the cathodic protection program. That's over a $9 million project. Another one is we are moving forward with the PV lateral, and while we have received external funding for a good portion of that, either from one of our customers or we received grants, there are still additional dollars that's there. I know we have applied for a state loan associated with it, but we have not received confirmation, if you will, that that loan has been received. So again, if we are to utilize the funds, if you will, for the commercial paper, And then at some later point, we are able to receive, another low interest loan and or external funding, even better. We would then be able to pay off that commercial paper instead of having to go out and perhaps finance these commercial papers more on a long-term basis. So that's just a couple examples.
So the examples were potentially the solids handling project, which may or may not be a project. This is not a project yet. The exotic protection project, which was approved, and so now we're being asked to borrow money to finance it because it's already in process instead of knowing that in advance. And what was the other one? You kind of, I lost you again, and I apologize. But can you?
No worries. So it was the PV lateral, the cathodic protection, the solids handling. There are also, again, those are the ones that are specifically, I will know, are noting that are happening now. Other potential ones for use is the phase 2 and 3 microfiltration replacements of the units there. Again, I have to go back and look at the CIP, but it's my understanding too that would be a good use of the commercial paper. And again, this isn't a 1-year program, but a 3-year program. And so again, looking over the horizon, where would we potentially be using this? Again, the best way for us to do this is to, try to find external funding. But when we don't have that, then looking at the right balance between cash and debt. And again, these particular projects that have been identified are those that seem to have a 20-year useful life. And so we would be matching, if you will, the revenues that we would get for the ongoing use of those particular assets, along with the costs associated with it, in this case, debt service.
So we talked about, and I apologize because I kind of lose you sometimes. So solids handling, cathodic protection, PV lateral, the other projects were kind of from the master plan, but we don't have a specific list of projects we're committed to doing. And so with the exception of cathodic protection, which is already undergoing, it's in place. The PV lateral is coming up. Right now we're in design, and we do have some financing for that in place. And so I don't know how much money we're going to have to borrow for that. And then the other one that you had mentioned was the solids handling, which may or may not be something that needs to be proceeded with this year. So I don't know how much money we're talking about. I think the cathodic protection was about an $8 million project. How much of that is going to be paid for by pay-go versus having to borrow money? But my question is, do we really need to borrow money? Because for doing this, it's supposed to be using funds that we have available, which may or may not be budgeted for this purpose at this point, but the district does have. And so my comment is, I'm not quite sure that we've and justify why we need a line of credit at this point and why we continue to rely on that. And I think we've talked about a little bit at the committee meeting about the need to better prioritize projects, know what their costs are, and better budget for those. So those are just my comments on this particular item.
And I certainly appreciate it, and thank you for your comments. Again, this action that we're taking here is we want to make sure that we can keep this commercial paper program that we've established. Prior to this commercial paper program, we did have another sort of a direct loan program that was very beneficial for us as we were doing phase 5, for instance, and that gave us the opportunity to go in with a very low interest rate, and then at a time that we could then refund it on a long-term basis. It actually gave us some advantage on that as well. Also, too, again, the action we're taking today is not after actually having any debt. It's just providing us that market access to it. And so we are looking at ensuring that because this is over a 3-year period of time, we are looking at what are those costs over that period of time as well. So again, to your point, yes, there are some actions that have not been taken by the board today. And there may be other actions that are taken by the board in a future year that are not on our current 5-year list. again, we would just want to make sure that we are in the right position to do so. We don't move forward with the commercial paper program, we would be in a position where we wouldn't need to then go out on an individual basis, perhaps. Again, if we don't have external funding and there isn't sufficient PAYGO funding, and that will be more costly. As you just heard from the bond council report, their fee just to do a new transaction is about $65,000. That's just one of the costs that's there, and there are others. Financial advisors, rating reports, and other associated costs, which could be about $200,000. So what this action is asking is that it makes sure that we have a low cost of entry, if you will, into the market, and make sure that we have that there. If we are in a position where we go and utilize the commercial paper, find ourselves where, yes, we were successful in getting a grant, we can then use those grant funds to reimburse us and not be in a position to put this out on the long-term basis. It is making sure that we have adequate funds at the time that we need them. Again, if these are critical projects that need to move forward, we need to make sure that we have the appropriate funding available for them. And that is why staff is asking for the renewal of this commercial paper program.
Thank you. Very good answer. Director Williams, did you have a question?
I would like to move this on to the full board.
All right, I agree, so we will do so. The recommendation has been accepted and sent to the full board. Now we got to come to item 6, information calendar.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman Deere. The next item is 6A. It's our return to the office update. It's an oral report by our manager of human resources, Michelle Green. However, I did want to point out that there was an item that was emailed out to the board, and I believe we have a hard copy here for Director Alvarez, who's here in the office. It is related to the mandatory proof of vaccination policy. And I do know that Michelle Green has been working with our legal counsel on this item. And so here to present that item is Michelle Green.
Thank you, EJ, and good afternoon, Chairman Deere and members of the board. As a reminder, at our last update or return to the office update in August, at our August Finance and Administration Committee meeting, I reminded everyone that at the July 26, 2021 board meeting, the board approved mandating proof of vaccination for all district employees, and that staff was verbally informed of the board's decision at an all-hands meeting on July the 29th, 2021. And in essence, I also reported that employees have already submitted proof of vaccination to the Human Resources Department staff. So what I'd like to do today is walk you through, and what was also, reported was that a draft policy was under review and soon to be formally distributed to staff. As EJ mentioned, that draft policy has been reviewed by legal counsel, and so now I am ready to present that or walk you all through what the policy indicates. So the policy has several parts to it. One is the purpose of the policy, the scope, procedures, what is considered acceptable proof of vaccination, what would be defined as a reasonable accommodation, and then explanation of what weekly COVID testing would consist of. So first and foremost, the purpose of this policy is in accordance with West Basin's duty to provide and maintain a workplace that is free of known hazards. We are adopting this policy to safeguard the health of our employees, directors, and their families, our customers and visitors, and the community at large from infectious diseases such as COVID-19 that may be reduced by vaccinations. This policy will comply with all applicable laws and is based on guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and local health authorities as applicable. Further, the purpose of this policy is to note also that it is only effective during the present public health emergency or while certain health risks are present. The scope is that all employees and West Basin directors are required to submit proof of vaccinations as determined by West Basin's Office of the General Manager under the direction of the board, unless a reasonable accommodation is approved. Employees and directors not in compliance with this policy or those who have an approved reasonable accommodation will be required to submit to weekly COVID-19 testing. The procedures for the policy are that employees and directors will be required to provide either proof of vaccination or submit to weekly COVID-19 testing to be in compliance with the policy requirements. The following COVID-19 vaccinations would, when completed, provide compliance with the policy. So the first vaccine, of course, is Pfizer, then we have Moderna and Johnson & Johnson. West Basin employees and directors who cannot provide proof of vaccination may receive the vaccination at various locations and may use the following website to obtain more information on vaccine walk-in or appointment clinics, including locations. That website is myturn.ca.gov. The vaccination is free to all and no insurance is required. In accordance with the American Rescue Plan of 2021, all employees who decide to receive their vaccinations during regular working hours will be paid for the time to be taken to receive vaccinations. If an employee needs to be vaccinated, they should work with their supervisor or manager to schedule an appropriate time to receive the vaccine. Employees must use the appropriate COVID pay code, and which we have defined as CD1, on their timesheet when receiving the vaccination during regular working hours. Now, what is considered acceptable proof of vaccination? Employees and directors are required to submit proof of vaccination with it, which is either a copy of a valid COVID-19 vaccination card or a printout of vaccination record using the California Department of Public Health official website system. The Public Health Department system link is as follows, and that is myvaccinerecord.cdph.ca.gov. Anyone who has received the vaccine in the state of California will have their information in this system. Proof of vaccination must be submitted to the Human Resources Department only in paper form. An email will not be accepted. All records will be kept in the employees and the director's confidential medical record file, which is under lock and key. An individual is considered fully vaccinated 2 weeks after completing the second dose of a 2-dose COVID-19 Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, or 2 weeks after receiving a single dose of a 1-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Employees and directors who have received at least 1 dose of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine are considered partially vaccinated and do not meet the definition of fully vaccinated. In accordance with this policy, they will need to submit to weekly COVID-19 testing and wear a KN95 mask covering their nose and mouth indoors, unless they're in a private office, like myself today, room with a closed door, or when in a shared vehicle until they are considered fully vaccinated. Now, what is considered a reasonable accommodation? Employees and directors in need of an exemption from this policy due to a medical reason or because of a sincerely held religious belief must submit a completed request for accommodation form to the Human Resources Department to begin the interactive accommodation process as soon as possible. Accommodations will be granted where they do not cause West Basin undue hardship or pose a direct threat to the health and safety of others. Employees and directors who request an exemption will be required to be tested weekly for COVID-19 and wear a KN95 mask covering their nose and mouth indoors, unless again in a private office or room with a closed door, or when eating or drinking, or when in a shared vehicle. Lastly, the policy notes what weekly COVID-19 testing would consist of. Employees and directors who are required to submit to weekly COVID-19 testing under this policy are covered by the following procedures. First, the COVID-19 testing will be provided to employees at no cost during their work hours, following a process and timeline determined by West Basin Human Resources personnel. COVID-19 testing for directors will be provided at no cost as well and must follow a process determined by West Basin Human Resources personnel. Submit test results to the Human Resources Department. The test results must be submitted in paper form and will be placed in the employee's or the director's official medical record file.
I'm online for the meeting. What's that?
Unless you are not on mute, Director Gray. Just wanted to note that. Unless hand-delivered directly to Human Resources personnel, please ensure that test results are placed in a confidentially marked and sealed envelope. If an individual tests positive as a result of their weekly COVID test, West Basin will follow CDC and local health authority guidelines for quarantine periods and timelines for returning to the office. And lastly, the policy notes to direct any questions regarding the policy to the Human Resources Department staff. As I mentioned, staff were already made aware of this policy on July 29th, 2021. And so they have already submitted, we have received submittals from all staff regarding their vaccine status. So as I previously indicated, we have approximately 90% of our staff who are vaccinated. And we, of course, have moved forward as well with some staff who are not, who are getting tested for getting weekly testing as required if they will be coming into the office. And that concludes my report, unless anyone has any of the directors have any questions.
I have a question about the sentence that talks about being in a shared vehicle.
Yes.
It sounds a little confusing unless you look at the way it's punctuated. That means you must wear the mask when you're in a shared vehicle. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we do have a district vehicle where we have staff who are required to go out into the field often. And so there are occasions where other staff might be assisting that individual, or they may have to go out into the field together. So this is specific to when staff are, either using that shared vehicle to go out to a work site situation. Typically, if staff have to go out to a construction site or things of that nature, they're driving on their own. At this point in time, but in the event that there is a situation where staff have to drive together, this is what what this means by shared vehicle.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I could.
Williams.
This is concerning other public agencies that we deal with. For instance, some of us directors are also members of boards like the county or others. Do we have reciprocity with these boards, that if you're approved by one board and you show that proof that you're approved by West Basin?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Director Williams. Are you asking if other boards require proof of vaccination? Do you have reciprocity?
Yeah,
If you provide.
Yeah, if they've given you approval that you are vaccinated and you meet all of their guidelines concerning the COVID, that approval, you would also meet. West Basin would accept that as a proof that you've been vaccinated.
So pursuant to what the policy indicates, and again, this is a template, not a lot of agencies have policies already in place or implemented. And so this is a template that I utilize from, various sources. And essentially, it does say that proof of vaccination come in two forms. One of which is a copy of the valid COVID-19 vaccine record, or vaccine card, I should say rather, or going to this website where you would input your information and then get I believe it's a QC code that shows that you are vaccinated. So right now, pursuant to this policy, if an employee or a director were to submit proof, it would have to come in one of those two forms.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good report. Any other questions?
Chairman Deere, I have a question.
More questions? Go ahead.
How many employees, you said about 10%, but how many employees are not vaccinated?
We have approximately or exactly 3 employees.
Okay. And of those 3, what are the reasons for not vaccinating? Medical or?
All medical at this point.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Chairman Deere, if you don't mind, I did want to give credit to our HR department for putting this plan in place. And I think we're, as far as small agencies go, we're far ahead of the curve. And actually, Michelle and her team are actually fielding questions and inquiries from other agencies, trying to catch up and see exactly what we're doing. So I want to give them a lot of credit, as well as credit to our legal counsel for their assistance in this.
Very good. We thank everyone who's involved. Very good.
Thank you.
If no other questions on item 6A, we'll go to 6B.
Yes, thank you. Item 6B is our fiscal year 2020-2021 small and local business annual report. This does begin on packet page 115. And Joanna Garcia Singleton is here for this presentation, and she serves as our contracts administrator.
Thank you, EJ. Good morning, Chairman Deere and members of the board. As EJ mentioned, this item does begin on page 115 of the agenda package. The district does maintain a small and local business enterprise policy to encourage the participation of small and local businesses in the district's competitive solicitation process. As stated on page 115 of the agenda package, the policy sets a 10% annual target participation goal and also requires staff to present an annual report to the Board of Directors to reflect on the effectiveness of the Small and Local Business Enterprise Program. So as such, I would like to turn your attention over to attachment A, the annual program report, which is on page 117 of the agenda package. And then we can skip forward to page 118. So first, we'll go over last fiscal year's activities and achievements. We started off the year by researching other agencies' small and local programs, mainly looking at the incentives that those other agencies award to small and local firms. We then reviewed the district's small and local policy as a whole and increase the district's incentive points. The revised policy was approved by the board in September of 2020. Then we met with various departments at the district to discuss the details of the Small and Local Business Enterprise Program and to encourage staff to use sheltered bidding for the informal solicitations. As a reminder, sheltered bidding is a bidding mechanism where staff requests proposals or quotes from only eligible small and local vendors, and this is for solicitations that are under $50,000. Our outreach with the departments led to our first sheltered bidding procurement for the Rain Barrel Local Shipping Company. As you all may recall, last year the district delivered rain barrels to residents of our service area. The shipping company that delivered those rain barrels was a small and local business contracted through the district's sheltered bidding program. Next page, please. As I mentioned previously, section 5-2.109 of the Small and Local Business Enterprise Policy does set a 10% annual target participation goal for all eligible expenditures. It's important to note that the eligible expenditures only includes procurement spend and does not include potable water charges, debt services, permits, employee reimbursements, travel, sponsorships, memberships, and regulated utilities. Next slide, please. So this table here highlights the total eligible spend, the small and local spend, and the spend percentage for the past 3 years. As you can see, in fiscal year 2021, we had $47 million in eligible spend. The total small and local spend was $11.2 million, which puts us at a 24% participation rate for fiscal year 2021. Of course, it's a little less than fiscal year 1920 where we had 28%, but nonetheless, we're happy to report that we have met and are actually well over that 10% annual target participation goal. Next slide. Next, we'll go over some vendor demographics. We have a total of 1,861 vendors in our financial system. Not all of those vendors are considered eligible vendors, as some of those vendors are employees or sponsorships or memberships. So we don't count those, which gives us a total of 1,075 eligible vendors. 455 of those eligible vendors are local and 59 are small. Next slide. Here you'll see the number of small and local vendors used in the past 3 years. As you can see, in fiscal year 2021, the district contracted with 26 small businesses, 73 local businesses that are within a 25-mile radius of the DLD building, and 23 local businesses that are within the district's service area. And as you can see, we did contract with less small and local vendors in fiscal year 2021, but we had almost the same amount of spend as we did in fiscal year 1920 with those fewer vendors. Next slide. So next we'll dive in deeper and look at the small and local vendors used by account, beginning with the small vendors, and we can move on to the next slide. So this pie graph here represents the small vendors used by account for fiscal year 2021. Consultants were the highest at 27%, meaning that 27% of the small vendors contracted with were for consultant services. The next highest was CIP, capital improvements, at 23%. Then we had a few accounts at 8%, which were machinery and equipment, software licenses, repair and maintenance, and then the balance were all at 4%. Next slide. So next we'll look at the local vendors used by account, and then we can move on to the next slide. The highest account was for repairs and maintenance at 26%. Then again, we had CIP at 16% and consultants at 16%. The rest of the accounts were all under 5%. We'll move on to the next slide. So now we'll narrow it down even further and look at the top 5 small and local vendors. So first we have Jones Chemicals Incorporated. The district contracted with them for about $2.9 million last fiscal year. They are a supplier of various chemicals at the district, and they are a local vendor. Next is RSH Construction Services. District contracted with them for about $2.5 million. They were the contractor for the microfiltration filtrate steel tank project, and they are a small business. Tharsos Incorporated, we contracted with them for about $931,000. They are the contractor for the sodium hypochlorite storage tank replacement project, and they are also a small business. Next is Univar USA Incorporated. They came in at around $505,000. They are a sulfuric acid supplier and a local business. And last was Buetier Engineering Incorporated. We contracted with them for about $434,000. Buetier is one of our on-call consultants, and they are also the construction management consultant for the JMMCRWRP Phase 2 Carson expansion project that is currently underway. And Buetier is a small business. Next slide, please. So next we'll go over our action plan for the current fiscal year 2021-22. We can move on to the next slide. So of course, we will continue to advocate for and encourage our staff to use sheltered bidding for their informal solicitations. We also plan to contact our current vendors to see if they may qualify as small businesses. We recognize that some of our current vendors may qualify as a small business per the Small Business Administration, also known as SBA, or the California Department of General Services, also known as DGS. So some of our vendors may qualify per these organization standards. However, the businesses may not be aware that they qualify, so we plan to conduct some outreach to let those vendors know that these programs are out there and hopefully increase our small vendors here at the district. And last, we want to come up with a mechanism to capture the utilization of small and local subcontractors by prime contractors. The district contracts with prime contractors who may not be small or local, but may use smaller local small or local subs. And we want to be able to capture that utilization as well. We have to conduct some research to understand how we can actually confirm that those payments are being, from the primes to the subs. And that concludes my presentation for today. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Apparently it was clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What's that? Okay, we'll go on to item, where are we on this one? 6C.
Thank you very much, Chairman Deere. As you mentioned, item 6C is our last item. It does begin on packet page 131, and this is our monthly financial report. And we do have Marianne Rexroad, our manager of finance, here for this presentation.
Thank you, EJ. And once again, good afternoon, Chairman Deere, members of the committee and board. As EJ mentioned, beginning on page 131 of your packet is the monthly financial report the staff is required to submit to the board each month. They include the monthly demands, cash and investments, water sales, the conference and travel expense reports as well. So beginning on page 133, that runs through page 138, are the demands for the month of August. The demand list represents all the payments that we made during the month, and they support the operation of the district. For the month of August, we had total demands of about 16.6 million, which is shown on page 138. And if there are any questions on those demands, I'd be happy to try to answer those for you.
Are there any questions? Apparently not.
No,
Right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, moving on to the cash and investment report, that does start at the top of page 139.
Hold it. Director Williams has a question. Go ahead, Director Williams.
No, thank you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go on then. Please continue.
No worries. All right, well, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this since you did hear a very comprehensive report from Chandler Asset Management just a little while ago. But as Margaret pointed out, this report in front of you, which starts on page 139 and goes all the way to page 145, is for the period of, well, as of August 31st, 2021. And it does include all of the district's cash and investments, which includes what Chandler manages for us, as well as what the district has. As Margaret mentioned, LAIF in our checking accounts. You'll see for the month, or as of August 31st, we are about 91 million. Moving on to the next page. Again, I won't spend a lot of time on this because you heard Chandler talk about types of investments we had, the credit quality, and it's pretty consistent from what you saw in June to what we see now in August, not a lot of movement. And going down to the next page, this shows our activity for the month of August, where Chandler showed you the whole quarter. This is just for the month. Just one thing I want to make note of is you'll see at the very top under the buys, about halfway down that column of buys, you'll see Manufacturers Bank. Staff did reinvest the CD that it had invested in a local bank, local small bank, for $250,000 for a 12-month period of time for 20 basis points. And then the following pages from page 142 to 145 is all the details, cash and investments that the district had as of August 31st, 2021. So that kind of concludes the report on cash investments, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on those.
Are there any questions?
No, thank you.
Apparently not. Please continue.
Okay, moving on, thank you. Moving on to your sales, water sales report for the month of August. This report does show not only the fiscal year 2022, but also compares the results for the 2022 to the prior year and to the budget. So I'm just going to start off at the top of page 146. You'll see that for fiscal year 22 compared to the prior year, we were down about 400 acre feet for the month of August, which is about 4%, and then about 166 acre feet less than the budget, or about 2%. And on a year-to-date basis, again, we were just below prior year for about 850 acre feet, again, about 4%, and about 300 acre feet than the budget, or about 2%. Just one thing of note, it's early in the year, things obviously can change, but we'll continue to monitor this, and as we see any changes, of course, we'll bring it to the board. Moving down to the bottom of page 146, you have your imported barrier sales. And you can see quite a difference for fiscal year 22 as compared to fiscal year 21. The year to date, for the month of August, fiscal year 22, we were about 1,100 acre feet more than the prior year, and about 947 acre feet more than the budget. And on a year-to-date basis, we were, again, 2,000 acre feet more than the prior year, and about 1,500 acre feet more than the budget. As you are aware, we had higher injection into to the barrier due to the Hyperion sewage spill, and we'll again continue to monitor that and report out to the board as we have more information on that. Moving to the next page, at the top of page 147, you have your recycled water sales. Beginning with the month of August, fiscal year 22 was below prior year by about 1,200 acre feet, or about 38%, and about 1,300 acre feet below budget. On a year-to-date basis, we were also below budget, unfortunately about 2,000 acre feet, and then that was about 32%, and then about 2,200 acre feet on a year-to-date budget versus actual. As I mentioned earlier, with the spill at Hyperion and the result at our treatment plant, we weren't able to inject much water into the barriers. And so again, as we hear things going on and we see what the results of that, we'll report out to the board and to the committee on that. Moving down on the bottom of page 147, you have your brewer desalter. As you can see, for fiscal year 22, both on the month and for the year to date, we didn't have any sales for the brewer desalter. And I'll pause there to see if there's any questions.
Apparently not.
All right, thank you. Moving down to page 148 are the director's conference and travel expense. This is as of August 31st, 2021. And you can see the total spend was just under $170 compared to a budget of $75,000. And then the following page are the executive management and staff travel expense, again through August 2021, with a total of about $750 for the year as compared to a budget of $115,000. And that concludes my report. Again, be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you very much for the final report. We'll go on to, is there a closed session?
Chairman Deere, there are no closed session items today.
All right, director's comments. Director Williams, any comments?
No, thank you.
Okay, the other directors? Director Gray, are you still aboard? Okay.
I'm here. Director here. Can you hear me? I'm still here.
Oh, good. Well, thank you for attending our meeting, and apparently we have no further business, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.